Yeah.
Anti-fascist action gets a lot of attention, both in the mainstream media and on social media. But in fighting to keep our communities safe, we often overlook where the things we know about fascist groups actually come from. Our guest today is an anti-fascist, anti-TERF cult researcher who has been closely investigating the so-called gender-critical movement in the UK for a few years now, and has a lot to teach us about how cult researchers keep us informed on what our nasty little friends on the far right are up to. Um, it is a little early, so we won't bring him in just yet, but our guest is going to be M of the two hosts, E and M, of Blood and Turf podcast, which is a really good show, very well researched, who've been researching turfs for a while. I can speak to one incredibly based thing M has done personally, is that I've complained before that the LGBT Alliance has so much power in our country right now. Like Stonewall's been pushed out. All partnerships with Stonewall have been ended across the board, like universities, companies, all of them. Just like anyone who was formerly taking advice on how to do diversity right from Stonewall is no longer, because Stonewall accepts trans people and it's been pushed out of everything. And meanwhile, the LGBT Alliance, which doesn't represent LGBT people, it's just an anti-trans hate group, has been given charity status by the Charities Commission. And M went to the LGBT Alliance conference and
just so you know, Sophie, I'm getting messages, frantic messages from him in the
should
chat
I stop?
saying you shouldn't be saying this.
No. All right. Disregard my whole story.
So hopefully everybody didn't hear that, and it's okay. It's not a big deal.
He says it's okay. It's not a big deal. Anyway, that whole story that didn't happen was based.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, an imaginary story, but like that was a different M.
Oh yeah, he's saying it actually wasn't him. Okay. Right. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, redacted.
But yeah, our next guest is gonna come on and talk to us about cults. So I guess we should. Yeah. Did you have more, Sophie?
Well, I just wanted to prep the ground, bit of a discussion. What does anybody here know about cults before we begin, I guess?
I would say, a little bit, like, I haven't personally been involved with a cult myself, but I have had plenty of friends like fall into them over the years. Like just people I knew from school or whatever, or even like I've had a friend who has been, well, I've had friends that have been involved in a couple of different religious groups that they have described as cults, but the mainstream don't define them as cults, and just like certain Christian sects. A friend of mine was Hare Krishna for a long time. And things like this, like I guess more mainstream cults or whatever. And I know some people
really interesting. Like they would give out free meals a lot around the university UCL, where I went to uni. And I don't know much about them, but they never seemed particularly sinister or anything.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. There is actually there are kind of a bunch of different splits within the the temple as a whole or whatever. But a friend of mine said that it is it's like a weird like toxic positivity thing, but there is a lot of like abuse and things that happen in the group that they were involved with, that and like just a bunch of really shitty ideas. But on top of that, like I also have friends that have grown up in really tight-knit like Jehovah's Witness and Seventh-day Adventist communities where they do live remote and aren't like kind of doing their own thing. In New Zealand we also have like the Exclusive Brethren and a couple of others, which are kind of like like I know people that have come out of these and referred to them like, no, I was definitely in a cult, but to the outside a lot of people just say no, that's just a religion or whatever. But yeah, New Zealand does have a thing. There's like actually have been a lot of groups that have moved from internationally to New Zealand to set up like little enclaves and things like that. Just because, well, like a lot of them started a long time ago, so it was back when I guess New Zealand wasn't was a little bit a little bit looser, I would say, and they thought, okay, we're gonna move out to the out to the I don't know, like the frontier or whatever, and we're gonna have our little creepy little enclave. But there's been quite a few that have been busted over the years for all manner of bullshit. Same out. There's a couple out in the islands as well, different Pacific islands. Yeah, But yeah, and there's also, like, there's also, like, I think we're probably going to talk about it with Im, but the whole thing about, like, the definition of cults, because there are definitely things that aren't, like, religious cults that still are cults, and I think, like
Yeah,
TERFs and things
definitely.
like that.
Like QAnon, for instance, that's an obvious one.
Yeah, like QAnon. Like, I mean, I think everyone probably knows someone that's been involved with QAnon at this point, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I think there's a really weird spectrum to look at, right? Because, like, to take two examples from the UK, there's something called the Order of the Nine Angles here, which is a Satanist murder cult. Like, they're neo-Nazis, and they've killed a bunch of people, and they basically put out releases like fucking Al Qaeda. Like, they put out little images and stuff to taunt the police, kind of shit. They're this kind of level of comic book villain kind of evil.
Wow.
And then there's, like we say, like TERFs, where it's like most of anything that you're going to interact with directly is like your mom started saying dodgy stuff about how we have to bow down to gender ideology, and you have to be like, no, mom, that's not real, blah blah blah. And it's like so much still culty behavior, right? But like partly because of, I guess, the free associativeness. I don't know. We'll ask him in a minute. I don't know, we'll see.
And you do get like a lot of these weird like figureheads in these movements as well, that are like the cult leaders or whatever. So I don't know. I guess we'll talk to Em about that and like figure out, like is that, I don't know, like does that qualify or not? But yeah, I don't know. Like aside from that, I don't have really any like personal experience aside from like trying to support friends leaving those kind of environments. I don't know. Has anyone here had any like had any really close calls with cults or anything?
My whole experience is from the same side that we're going to be talking to M about to something. I fucking you get the gist of this sentence.
Good one.
Most of my experience is the same as M's, more or less. Only M's is, I think, more interesting and cooler. Where from the perspective where I'm like trawling through like Stormfront and other like neo-Nazi forums to understand what creeps are up to and like see what makes them tick and why they're doing stuff. I will grab a bunch of books in a second and maybe recommend some of them, because I've been researching about conspiracy theories for a while, and actually this will be a big part of our discussion today. Like conspiracy theories, cults, there's a lot of overlap that's like relevant.
I was about to say, when you've talked about conspiracy theories before on my stream, we had that conversation. I still think about it. The conversation we had where you were talking about like how the foundation for conspiracy theories, it's always gonna like be there, and like the ways that our environment helps to encourage like people to adopt them. It seemed very similar to the way the cult works. And if you think about it, QAnon is like a cult that is based on conspiracy theories. Right. I mean, what is a conspiracy theory at the end of the day? If it's something that is appearing to be some sort of religion, I don't think it's like less of a conspiracy theory. It's just like more of like a religious version of one, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure that Em will tell us loads about it shortly. I was actually remembering something else that we said earlier on a different stream of yours, Nicole. Because about these striking workers, I just remembered. We were talking the other day, in case people saw this, about like a hypothetical Trump town and like stagnating wages and the cost of living goes up and up and up, right? Like, and the way that people get trapped,
right?
What do you call it? We called it gridlock because it was like a motor town, but no one could escape. Like, yeah, I don't know. I just remember that. I thought people who, sorry, this is meant to be a short note. People who saw that, that's relevant to the strike news, I think. Have a think about it. But yeah, conspiracy theories are universal, right? Like people anywhere can believe them, and any kind of people can believe them, because it's kind of like a human tendency. It's to do with like pattern recognition and like what you think is emotionally real. And then you start to find out that like, and also conspiracy theories can often take like kind of any shape because they reflect like intergroup social conflicts, but they can take certain shapes over and over again. And that's where they get really culty, because they can take a shape where they're like leading up to the big thing happening, right? Like, it's coming soon, and I think is a big difference between like your man in the pub bigotry, where someone's just being like, I can't tell them apart, and they don't even learn the language, and they're taking our jobs and all this shit, versus someone who's like, it's reaching a point where soon something will have to be done. It's like that person believes some kind of conspiracy and is being brought into like culty kind of reasoning, right? Like
100%.
They're being motivated to action on purpose. Like we're very, very open about how we motivate people to action here on Red Planet. We call it homework. We tell people what they can do. We talk about why we want to do stuff. But if what you want is to make people do really horrible shit, you, I think, often can't be as open about it, right?
Yeah, no, of course. You have to just be like, let people come to their own conclusions, which is kind of like that happened with Charlie Kirk. I think we mentioned that on the stream last time, or maybe the week before. Yeah, like when people will come to the conclusion that you egg them onto, basically. It's basically like saying,
absolutely.
It's basically like saying these people are going to come for you and they're going to kill you, and we need to be ready. We need to be ready for them. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, well, he's saying that we should be ready. They're coming to kill us. So that must mean that we've got to kill him. We got to kill him first. That's what, that's what it is.
Yeah. Like, it's like they throw down all the like they don't say like, oh, this is what you need to do, but they lead like this breadcrumb trail all the way up to it, you know, and it's like telling you about the people that are like an existential threat, and then they're like, oh, by the way, hey, every American needs to like, you know, like own a gun and go out and do this and all this kind of shit like that.
If you watch Alex Jones on Joe Rogan, Alex Jones was talking about how he knows that they've been keeping babies alive so that they can sell their body parts. And it's this whole organ harvesting conspiracy theory. And it seems very abstract. And then he starts saying, I know the locations of places where they're doing this. And and those are abortion services is what he's talking about. And he's like going to literally give places for people to go with guns. It's really, really scary.
It's so bad.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, speaking of inciting violence, Andy Ngo was recently getting some attention for having
I was just thinking
inciting violence.
Having driven people to violence. And with Andy Ngo inspiring mass shootings, it's a funny one because there was someone who I wasn't going to include in my conspiracy on the left script because they're kind of a bit of a leech and like take any attention that they get and run with it.
Oh, and they love it,
And they said that Andy Ngo sharing pictures upskirting me on my first trans rights protest speech wasn't a big deal and was like no worse than like cyberbullying their friend had gotten from breadtubers.
I remember.
And I just felt very vindicated by that. You know, Andy Ngo is a dangerous fucking creep.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, you know,
and like has legitimately been responsible for like so much, I would say, damage to public discourse and like even like I think people don't realize how tied in Andy is a lot of really bad shit that's happened because he somehow manages to just stay behind the wave as it's kind of crashing down. But so that latest shooter that was like a big fan of his and stuff, he after that all came out, he deleted a shitload of tweets, like where he was talking about the events, like about Normandale, this kind of stuff. So
fucking
I feel
coward.
like it's
What a coward.
People have made bots now to catalog his tweets, and then when he deletes them, highlight them, sort of thing like that. So there is like, you know, it's getting to the point where it's like this dude can't hide from, you know, this forever. It's, you know, like too many people know and are watching him now. But yeah, absolute piece of shit, and just like a general like clown of a person. Anyway,
fuck Andy Ngo.
And fuck anyone who says that he's not a fascist. By the way, like maybe people that go on Joe Rogan and proceed to say things like America's not a fascist state, and that Andy Ngo isn't a fascist, or that Andy Ngo is like a victim of like a milkshake. Fuck anyone who does that.
Right? Like, they always make out like he's a victim, right?
He is a victim of a milkshake.
That's true.
But it didn't give him brain damage. He already had the brain damage before the milkshake got to him.
The milkshake mixed with concrete powder, of course, because that's a thing. That's a thing.
I want to shout out two things really quick. So these are two books: "Culture of Conspiracy" by Michael Bakun and "American Conspiracy Theories" by Joseph E. Uzinski and Joseph M. Parent. They're both pretty good. And they're good catalogs of conspiracy theories, basically, if you want to know about like conspiracism and like this is the real shit. This one's fine. This is the real shit. Culture of Conspiracy Theory is good as fuck, and it's like my little handbook to like the conspiracy theory landscape, or as we call it, the cultic milieu. It just like has chapters and chapters and chapters on aliens, lizard people, Hollow Earth, Flat Earth, Roswell,
Oh, hell yeah.
9/11,
Oh, that sounds really
JFK,
good.
and it's like, oh, this fucking rocks, and it's just explaining how all of it works the whole way through, and like the history of movements, and like why people believe in the things, and so like that's a really, really cool approach, which is really useful, and it's definitely going to be like what a lot of my script that's coming up is based on. So, Culture of Conspiracy by Michael Barkun. I can't recommend that enough if people are interested in conspiracy theories. Yeah. Shall we bring him in?
I'm gonna, I need to grab something real fast and then we'll back. I just want, give me a second.
Okay. All right. Well, while she does that, I'll shout out the other book. The third book is Creating Conspiracy Beliefs by a whole ton of authors. I'm not going to read all of those out, but this one's not as good, honestly. I had a recommendation from an audience member, and I should know by now that audience members want to impress me, so they're just trying to have something to say, and then their recommendations turn out to not be good. I'm just kidding around. Like I learned a lot of cool stuff.
Sounds like too many cooks there. If there's
I
like
learned a lot of
multiple
cool stuff.
authors, you know.
It's a pretty good book, but I just want people who are interested and will read it to know that it's deeply liberal. Like there's some really interesting stuff. I ranted to Muel about this before, but like, for example,
that's the one you were talking about.
Yeah. They talk about like the Iran-Contra affair, and they're like people who believed before a certain point that the American government was selling arms to permanent government. They were conspiracy theorists because the CIA hadn't admitted it yet, and it's like, no, they fucking weren't. Fuck you.
No, shut up.
And shit like that, and it gets messy. I'll go into it in my video. It's all relevant. Maybe we'll even have some of that discussion today. But yeah, those are my 3 book recommendations, since that's my research stack for the vid.
Nice.
Wicked.
All right. Well, shall we see if Im is ready to come on through?
Let's bring him in.
Yeah. But yeah, there is actually a bit of a divide, and maybe we'll get around to talking about this with them as well. But there is a bit of a divide in, like, at least academic research into conspiracy and cults between like left-leaning liberals and actual leftists, and like liberals are quite severely limited in what they by their ideology. Basically, they're in the liberal mind prison. You know?
Liberal mind prison.
Yeah, the liberal. I love that phrase.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here is M from Blood and Turf Pod.
Hello.
Hey, Im.
Hi, hello there.
Welcome.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Oh, we got a good picture.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, I did consider it like once that got posted in the little like plotting the episode group chat. I was like, should I pick out a different anime waifu to depict me?
Hey, Em, real quick, is there any way you can get closer to your mic? I'm not sure if your mic is far from you.
Hold on, I'll just turn up the gain. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Chat, how's that sounding? Chat, give us some feedback.
What do you think, chat? Because I boosted you as much as I can, but chat, is that an okay volume? What M is that?
Gives a 1 2. Gives a 1 2
yeah,
1
give us
2.
a 2 2 1 2.
How about this?
That's better.
Jesus.
Sorry, I had to tweak the Discord settings. My bad.
No worries, no worries. Now I can actually turn you down a bit. This is great. Perfect. Thank you, Em. I appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. That's always a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah,
Em, you host the podcast.
When we got started, it was quite interesting.
Oh yeah, the Gendo Ikari. I just think he matches your vibes.
I mean, sure, you're the only one who's met me, so they'll have to take that on faith from you.
Yeah. Or did I meet the other M? Who knows? Nothing. I won't confirm or deny anything, actually.
Oh right, yeah. But okay, so the LGB Alliance thing was actually like really funny because so basically, for those of you who don't listen to the podcast, which I assume is most of you, me and the guy who I do the podcast with got a friend of ours who is a relatively experienced anti-fascist activist to go into the LGBT Alliance conference. And when we were relaying this to Sophie, we were like, Sophie, we've got audio from the LGBT Alliance conference. We've got the fuckers by the balls now. So presumably Sophie is now under the impression that it's just like MI5 over here, whereas actually
No, I know. Listen, I've known E for long enough to not believe that anything he's attached to is professional.
Yeah, he jealously defends that title of unprofessionalism, which is why we haven't released an episode in 3 months.
But I just thought that specific thing was very cool. But now I'm shy about what details I can share. Can you say about the fake name, or is that like because I thought that was funny, but if it would compromise something, then don't, obviously.
Oh, sorry, which one?
You said that you had an ID for going to the conference. You had a name label printed that was funny.
Oh yeah, so the guy we got to do it, right? We printed out a fake ID for him that identified him as Mark Fisher.
Amazing.
I just thought that was, yeah. Anyway, so M, what is Blood and Turf? What's that all about? What do you do over there?
Yeah, Blood and Turf is our Tin Pot podcast, which we've been running for about a year now. And it's essentially me and my friend E, and we look at mainly the UK side, but also like the transatlantic aspects of the transphobic political movement. That's how we refer to it. Just we have an umbrella term that encapsulates like gender critical people who are described as like being trans exclusionary radical feminists specifically, but also like the wider definition of transphobia that also encapsulates people in the Republican Party, or like full-on Nazis, or just more generalized liberal myopia towards trans people.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the podcast is to investigate links between the transphobic political movement and the rise of fascism and the rise of like far right and conspiracy theory ideologies. And it kind of looks at it through like an anti-fascist lens, essentially.
Is that for the rare listener who's just seeing like the rise of TERFs and they're seeing the rise of fascism all around the world, and they're like, that's weird, it's coincidence. That's funny. It's funny that happened.
I mean, I think there probably are still a few people out there who would hold that they're not inherently linked. I think that the anti-fascist milieu in the West is fairly small, but they're a fairly like intellectually dedicated lot. So I think most people would at least concede that there is some form of connection between those two components of reactionary politics. It's not so much, the purpose of the podcast isn't so much to like outright prove empirically that transphobia is a component of fascism. It's more to do a kind of like a running analysis on the manner in which it is connected to fascism. So it's less about proving it and more about examining and exploring it, because we consider it to be a done deal. And in our opinion, people who are going to be listening to our podcast are not the kind of people who are going to be particularly critical of that analysis of the situation.
That makes sense. I mean, as a trans person, as a British trans person in particular, I don't know if this was any of the intention, but like your podcast makes me feel a little safer. Like, but I've already said about this on the show before. This is certainly my personal tendency, and I don't know if this is everybody else's. But like, when I know about a scary thing, I feel safer, even if I'm not learning like reasons why it's not so bad. Like just knowing exactly how it works kind of helps me. And I certainly, like other trans people I've talked to, feel the same way about the pod. Again, I don't know if that was an intentional component, but certainly I always think of cult research as doing the work to help protect people.
I think particularly for E, that would have been part of the motivation. It might not have been something that we were kind of like thinking about in a really laid out intellectual manner, because when we started it, we kind of just started it as a prank. If you were to care to listen to our pilot episode, what like the setup for the pilot episode is we compare well-known rather transphobic sexologist Ray Blanchard to a figure from like the high Stalinist period of Soviet history, a guy called Trofim Lysenko, who invented a pseudoscientific version of agronomy. So like that's perhaps not the kind of thing that people think about when they're like setting up a grand plan to conquer the world.
You see people saying AGP on Twitter as a modern day Holodomor, basically.
No, I wouldn't quite go that far. I think
Sophie, you were wrong. That was wrong.
No, I was. My joke was good, Nicole. I promise.
It was a good joke. It was a good joke. That's right.
My point being that if we're the two kinds of idiots who think that that's a worthwhile concept for a shot in the dark podcast episode, it might perhaps indicate that we weren't thinking with a grand strategic plan at that point.
Got it.
Now things might have solidified that we have a bit more of an idea and an ideological rooting.
Oh yeah.
So we've been bouncing off the question because it is a tricky one and it is messy. But why don't we start with what a cult is? Because that's probably going to be important to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place to start. Amusingly, you guys actually preempted what my kind of like cold opening question was going to be, which was going to be: have any of you ever been in contact with a cult directly yourselves? And then we kind of like rattle through the things that you would have listed off, and I would have said, well, that's an interesting one. I think that fits certain definitions of a cult, don't you? Unfortunately, you guys torpedoed that one as soon as it left the harbour, but whatever.
I'm very sorry.
Right,
Well,
so,
I don't know. We can still talk about it further if you would like.
yeah.
Nah, let's get to it later. We got 3 hours.
Okay, fair enough.
Right, so what is a cult? So there are kind of a lot of mixed opinions about this within, I guess, the movement of people who do research into cults.
Yeah.
Most of the more seriously reputable authorities or authoritative organizations that are involved in this kind of stuff prefer not to nail down a hard and fast definition of what a cult is.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
There are some reasons for that, which we can get into. Oh, there's going to be a little on-screen note thing.
I don't know. I'm thinking about it. We've never done this one. I mean, the last stream, I kind of started writing things, and I think people kind of liked it. I don't know. Visuals, visuals.
I think that's entirely fair.
She's freestyling.
Yeah, mixing it up and keeping people guessing.
This is what we do.
It's good.
Yeah.
With the caveat that I am, of course, an amateur.
Got it. I'm gonna say, like, if you can't hang with a group that's always mixing it up, let us know now.
If you can't run with the big dogs, stay on the porch, all right?
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to say.
We're the big dogs, by the way, because that wasn't clear. We are the big dogs.
Just
I
saying.
actually stole that from one of those big dogs t-shirts, so just saying.
That'll be our official merch when we finally get it, which is be like,
yeah.
Anyways, what is it called? Well, I like that you brought up that it's kind of a moving target of a definition, that there's no definition really set in stone, because it does seem like I don't research this formally, but it does seem like whenever I've tried to approach this topic on stream, people, it's hard to find any sort of cemented definition that would work and apply to all the cults that people do traditionally consider cults, while also not applying to other things that people traditionally don't want to call cults. It seems to be it's kind of like a when you know it type thing. That's the vibe I get from people, which I don't think is sufficient to define anything, because that's extremely subjective.
Yeah, I think running things purely on vibes is it's okay if you're having a conversation with friends about something. Your friend tells you that they've joined some very weird political party that they picked up the newspaper from on a street, and they now have to donate $50 a month to them, and you're like, sorry, what? And then they say criticize them.
Yeah, that does sound like
internal rules. Say this, that, and the other, and it's like, oh, okay, right. Well, something's going on here. On the other hand, it might be that your great aunt Mabel has some really peculiar ideas about astrology, and occasionally goes to see someone who does tarot card reading for her, and has a really charismatically focused relationship with her tarot card reader. That might not necessarily be a cult, but some people might think of it in that way.
Little did the TERFs know, if they would stop asking you what is a woman and start asking you what is a cult, they could stump you really quickly.
Right, so I included a little thing in my notes about this. Those of you who are fully Twitter-pilled may remember a famous exchange that went down on Twitter when someone asked a TERF on how they would define a chair.
Yeah.
4 legs.
Right, so this is something I called the Diogenes trap, because it's based on this legend about Greek philosophers, where a bunch of them were arguing in the forum over what the definition of a man was. One of them said man is a featherless biped, and then the local homeless crank, a man called Diogenes, turned up, plucked a chicken and waved it around, saying, "Behold, a man." The problem with defining cults is rather similar to this.
Yes.
I remember like quite early on when I was getting interested in investigating cults, one of the websites that I was told by someone who I quite respected and still do quite respect as a researcher in cults, although I won't name them, to go to this particular website that had some good material on it. And to be fair, most of the material was good. But then, while they were listing through all of the different criteria, they said, you may have noticed that a lot of these criteria are similar to legitimate institutions in society. For example, we would never describe the Marines as a cult, and I was like,
Wouldn't we?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's what I mean
Sure,
before.
That's
It's like
a self-report.
it does seem pretty recursive. It's like those who are defining what a cult is, like
Yeah.
it seems like those definitions that people want to offer for what a cult is need to surgically excise anything that I wowould consider to be culty enough. Like the Marines seems pretty culty. Whether or not it's officially a cult, I'm not really sure what that even means. But the definition, the things, those cults are defined by those who want to define cults. Like it's just like any sort of definition.
The attempt to nail this stuff down, like really, like nail it to the cross, is essentially an exercise in I guess you could call it linguistic hegemony.
Motion to make Red Planet official position that all armed forces are a cult.
Seconded.
Approved.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Kid.
Great.
Right, there you
The
go.
Marines are a cult.
Marines are a cult. That's it. The Army's a cult. You
Resolved.
heard it first. Yep.
We're
Sorry, continue.
But
I'm
my
sorry.
stream, if you subscribe to my stream, it's not a cult for the record. When you're saying like you pay $50 a month to
if
a
you
service.
subscribe to me, it is.
Yes, I'm sure that no charismatic internet personalities have ever formed cults.
No, I'm sure they would
Oh,
never take
yeah.
advantage
Never.
of vulnerable,
Definitely
Definitely
vulnerable
not
men.
happening. Definitely not on Twitch.tv.
Not on Twitch.tv.
No way.
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
It never
No,
happens.
you can't.
We shall not make excuses for the terror.
Your consistent attacks on the life and livelihood of vulnerable members of our community has taught us and our allies to move in the shadows to remain invisible. And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.